Okay, this is English 373, week one, part two. So I mentioned last time that there's a wrong way to read Shakespeare. I'm sure some of you were offended by that. There's no wrong way to read Shakespeare, and obviously you can do whatever you want. But I think there are things that there are mistakes people make with Shakespeare. Um, and if they don't make those mistakes, it'll make your life a lot easier. Um, the thing is I think the correct way to read Shakespeare, or gosh, I should stop saying correct and incorrect. The most helpful way to read Shakespeare is something that is counterintuitive, meaning that you're not going to think of it. It seems what I'm going to tell you is going to seem real strange at first, because I think the correct way to read, the most helpful way to read Shakespeare, um, the most helpful way to read Shakespeare is to do things with Shakespeare you would never do with a modern day movie or a book that just came out. So let's talk about what those things are. One of the most important things I want to tell you about reading Shakespeare is that um, people who went to see a Shakespeare play back in the day, in the 1600s, we know Shakespeare lived in England. He wrote plays around 1600. I assume you know this. I don't know. Maybe you don't. I should say that. Shakespeare's the most famous writer in the world. He wrote a bunch of plays. I read 28 of them. I don't need more than that. He wrote a bunch of plays. 36, 38. Anyway, I don't remember. 39 plays? I don't know. I read 28 and I'm sticking with that. I don't need any more Shakespeare. I've been doing nothing but reading Shakespeare for about 4 years. Pretty much since Trump got elected, I was like, oh shit, I'm going to read nothing but Shakespeare to make myself feel better. And I did. I read 100 Shakespeare books, and I watched 100 Shakespeare movies because I'm crazy. Um, so the thing you got to understand about Shakespeare is that when people went to go see a Shakespeare play, first of all, for starters, people didn't read Shakespeare books. They saw Shakespeare plays. Some people will tell you that the play is the real way to get to, if you just see a movie or a play is the real way to do Shakespeare, and reading it is just, that's not what Shakespeare wanted. That's not really quite true. I think you do need to read Shakespeare. It's very difficult to kind of just understand Shakespeare from the plays or the movies. You're going to need to read, and I'll talk more about why that is later. Um, but when people went to go see a Shakespeare play in 1600, they knew the ending already. This seems bizarre to modern day people, um, but they knew the ending already. One of the things people forget about, or they don't know about, is that Shakespeare is considered to be like the greatest writer who ever lived. I actually think he is. I don't know if you're supposed to say that, but I think he is. Um, so um, people know Shakespeare as this very famous, important writer. But it's worth pointing out that, like, basically all of Shakespeare's stories, he did not make up. He adapted them. So, like, this comes to a shock to a lot of people, but, like, there was an extremely popular poem in the 1500s called Romeo and Juliet that told very similar story to and then Shakespeare was like, I'm going to turn this into a play, and then he did. Um, so most of, and so a lot of just about all of Shakespeare's plays, almost all of them, um, people showed up to see stories where they already basically knew what happened. Everybody knew. And they also tell you what's going to happen in the title, which is a crazy thing that you wouldn't do now. Um, but for example, they'll have a play called like The Tragedy of Hamlet. The word tragedy in the title means everybody, including the main character, is going to be fucking dead by the end of this thing. So they didn't when they got to the end and everybody was dead, they weren't like, oh no, they're all dead. Like they went in knowing that everybody was going to be dead at the end of the movie. And with things like Romeo and Juliet, um, the other play we're doing a play called Coriolanus, which is based off of Roman history. People knew what happened to that guy from Roman history. People knew what happened to Macbeth. It was like a famous story. Macbeth was actually a person who lived, and his story was written down in history books, and people knew who that was. So people knew what was going to happen to these characters before they got there. Um, in fact, Romeo and Juliet, in case you didn't know how Romeo and Juliet ends, Romeo and Juliet tells you, like, in the first 6 lines of the play, they tell you exactly how the play ends. Two houses, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers takes their life. They just told you right. That's the opening of the play. They tell you right there that those two kids are going to commit suicide. So when you get to the end, oh, I had no idea this was going to be such a sad thing. They literally told you 4 seconds after you sat down that this play is about a pair of star-crossed lovers takes their life. Um, so they tell you ahead of time what's going to happen. Now that to modern audiences that sounds crazy because when you go see a movie in theaters, you don't want spoilers. Um, if you're going to see Avengers Endgame, you don't want anybody to tell you who dies before you get to the theater. You would be fucking pissed off. Um, that's because when we go see movies, usually we want to find out what happens to the characters. It's worth pointing out this is not always true. Even today, a lot of people go to the theaters when they already know what's going to happen. For example, I'm thinking especially here of Harry Potter and Twilight. Both of which were extremely popular, both of which were based off of books that lots of people read and loved. And so, for a huge amount of the audience going to see Twilight and Harry Potter, I'm pretty big fans of both Harry Potter and Twilight, although I'm not really a big fan of J.K. Rowling. Oh my God. Jesus Christ, J.K. Rowling. And she made Harry Potter a cop. You should have known she was going to be fucking trouble. All right. So the Shakespeare where I totally lost my train of thought. J.K. Rowling and Twilight or Harry Potter and Twilight. People knew everything that happened because they read the book. And so when they went to go see the movie, they weren't like oh, what's going to happen next? They know how the stories ended, but they went to the movies anyway. Why did they go? If they knew it was going to happen, don't you? Isn't the whole point of reading a story to find out what's going to happen next? If you already know what's going to happen, what's the point? You'll hear people occasionally like, "Oh, I can't believe you spoiled the end of that movie. I'm not even going to go now." But most people, a lot of people, when they go to see the movies, they're going for something else. They're not going to find out what happens next. They're going for other reasons. They might be going to see CGI magic, Hollywood magic. They might be going to see the acting. There's a lot of great actors. Not so much in Twilight, but there's a lot of good actors in this. Twilight's not whatever. I like Twilight, but there's a lot of great actors in Harry Potter. Albus Dumbledore, Alan Rickman, and who's he? Oh, Michael Gambon plays Dumbledore, and Alan Rickman plays Snape. Anyways, a lot of great acting in the Harry Potter movies, and so people go to see that. People go to see CGI stuff. There's all kinds of reasons you might go to the movies. Like John Wick. I don't care what the fuck happens in John Wick. I don't care about the goddamn plot. I don't care who lives or dies. For me, going to see John Wick is like going to the ballet. I'm just there to watch bodies flying around in the coolest possible ways, in ways that I could never do. I just want to see cool. I want to see like athletes at the top of their game. That's why I'm there to see John Wick. I just want to see people jumping around and looking fucking cool. I don't really give a shit what happens in that movie. I don't even remember what happens. And I saw all three of those movies, and I don't even remember. I don't really care. I'm just there for cool fucking fight scenes. That horse kicked that dude in the head. It was great. John Wick 3 was fun. It kind of peaked like in the first half of it, but it was fun. Anyway, the point is that you go for other reasons. This is also true of Shakespeare. Shakespeare makes a lot more sense when you know what's going to happen ahead of time. So I'm going to tell you something that all of your teachers have been begging you not to do your entire life. I'm going to tell you to do it. Most of your teachers tell you, don't go on Wikipedia and read a summary. You need to read the book instead. Don't read a summary of the book on Wikipedia. Read the book. I think you should go on Wikipedia and read a summary of the Shakespeare play. It's just that I also think after you finish the summary, then you should go read the play. Again, why? Why the fuck would you read a play if you already read the summary? Isn't the summary enough? No, the summary is not enough. Just like people go to see the movies for reasons other than story, like, for example, the acting or the CGI or the choreography or the music or whatever, people go to see Shakespeare for other reasons other than plot. What are those things? There are things like character psychology. There are things like beautiful language. There's poetry. Shakespeare plays are poetry. That's why people go. What they are essentially, just like you might go to the movies just for the special effects, or just like you might go to John Wick just for the fight scenes, you go to Shakespeare for the special effects. It's just that the special effects don't look like they look in movies. In Shakespeare, I have some notes here. In Shakespeare, the special effects In Shakespeare, the special effects are things like the poetry, philosophy, and the personalities of the characters. I'll see you in the next video in a couple of seconds.